story that I'm going to tell you is a story out of the Bible. Okay, and it holds and teaches some really, really important lessons. There's actually quite a few lessons in the story. It's in Numbers 22. It starts at Numbers 22. It's about how God protects you, but more importantly, works behind the scenes. And that's the message of today. God behind the scenes. God protects us. God blesses us. The people that are against us, He reveals Himself to them. He goes against divination and dark arts against us. He moves us forward in life, and He keeps His promises that He has made to us. All of this in one story. Okay? It's a story of a person called Balak, Bilam, a donkey, an angel, and the Israelites who have no clue what's going on. Who's read this story before? Okay. For those of you that haven't, you're in for a treat. Balak was the king of Moab. Okay? His name means devastator or waster in Hebrew. Bilam, and we'll get to these people now, but Bilam was a well-known prophet for hire back in the day, in the biblical times. We're talking like 1400 BC at this point, okay? Bilam was a well-known prophet for hire, but more specifically in the dark arts. Not really a prophet of God, okay? And he apparently had the ability to bless and curse people, and he was super well-known for that. His name, funny enough, means not of the people, or foreigner. Okay? So in the story, we have the Israelites that have landed up just on the other side of the Jordan River, and they're about to cross over. Okay? But they're in the area called Moab. Now, the Moabites come from a person called Moab, which was the son of Lot and one of his daughters. So you can already imagine the sin upon these people, okay? They were born from an incestuous relationship. Not the greatest of starts. But they were family to the Israelites, if you think about it, because Lot was Abraham's nephew, okay? So we have the Israelites now rocking up in the land of Moab. But you know me with these talks that I give, I like to give a little bit of history, so just bear with me, because I want to show you how the Israelites got to this point. Okay, you all know I've spoken plenty about them in Egypt and coming out in the Passover and all of that sort of stuff, right? I want to talk more about now, I want to give you a bit of a quick history of where they were from Mount Sinai. If you remember what happened at Mount Sinai, they got the commandments, okay? They got the blueprint for the tabernacle, for God to dwell within them and among them. And they were in the wilderness for about a year at this point. Then they moved from there to Paran, which is most likely the southern side of the Sinai Peninsula. Okay? Not the best of times for the Israelites, I've got to say. They were speaking against Moses. Moses' sister was even speaking against him. Okay? And God kind of called him into the principal's office, and Miriam landed up with some sort of leprosy, and she learned a lesson, and Aaron was also speaking against him, and there was plagues that were breaking out. Not the best time for the Israelites, all right? And to top it off, just after that, they sent the 12 spies to Canaan, which is the promised land, and they come back and they're like, no, stop the bus, we're not doing this. God gets upset with them, they land up wandering in the desert for 40 years. The story that we're going to talk about today is 40 years later, okay? This is when, just before this, Moses has that incident where he tries to do something in his own strength and God gets upset with him. He tries to get water out of a rock. Aaron dies at the same time. There's lots of stuff that happens in Numbers. You guys should read it. A lot of good stories. Aaron dies because the people held him up as a demigod. And then Moses takes them and he starts defeating all the territories just before Moab. We're talking about Bashan, we're talking about the Emory and the king of Arat. Okay? So, yeah, they land up at Moab. Balak was the king of Moab. Funny enough, Balak was a vassal king to Sichon. Sichon was one of the kingdoms that they just destroyed. So you can imagine Balak at this point, right? He's sitting on this mountain, he's looking down at 2.4 million people wandering through the wilderness. You can just imagine what that might look like, okay? And in the middle, there's this tabernacle with the smoke going up. And obviously Balak's now freaking out. So I'm going to start off with Numbers 22, 1-4. This is how the story starts. This story actually spans 4 chapters. I'm going to condense it quite nicely. Okay? It says here, then the Israelites, let me read it here because it's different. Then the children of Israel moved and camped in the plains of Moab on the side of the Jordan across from Jericho. Now Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was exceedingly afraid of the people because they were many, and Moab was sick with dread because of the children of Israel. So Moab said to the elders of Midian, now this company will lick up everything around us as an ox licks up the grass of the field. And Balak, the son of Zippor, was king of the Moabites at that time. So Balak's freaking out, okay? Because now the Israelites have pretty much wiped out everyone before them. Balak shouldn't have been afraid at that point. They were family, okay? The Moabites were promised that land. Balak should have just left them, but he didn't. He started freaking out. He started getting scared. The spirit of fear came upon him. And one of the lessons in the story is about the spirit of fear. Balak was so scared that you'll see in the next verses, he goes and he gets a prophet for hire to come curse the people. I mean, God had promised them the land. He actually says in Deuteronomy 2 verse 9, he says, I will not give you any of their land as a possession because I have given Ar, which is this area, to the sons of Lot as a possession. It was always going to be for the sons of Lot. If you remember, Abraham and Lot split up, okay, when they were getting too numerous. They split up, and Abraham said to Lot, you choose what you want. I'll take the rest. Lot, a little bit selfish, he chose the land that had the most vegetation, the best soil. So he chose that area, Sodom, Gomorrah, and then east of the Jordan as well. But God said he will keep him. He will have that land. That's fine. But I want to warn you that the spirit of fear is dangerous, because this entire story would not have been in the Bible if it weren't for the spirit of fear. And it paints a very important picture for us. You know, we as humans, we fear things that we really shouldn't. Okay? And fear is not from God. All right? So when you fear something, let me tell you a little psychology that takes place in your mind. When you fear something, you're giving it essence. You're giving it a hold of you. Because the minute you start fearing that thing, and we humans, we do this all the time, the very thing we fear is the thing that actually ends up happening. I don't know if you've noticed this, but the minute you start fearing about something, that's not God's position for you. God might tell you to go in a different position, but because you fear a certain thing, you would rather go in the position in the defense of that fear. And that's the problem. And then we live out that fear, and that fear happens, and then we sit back and we say, I told you so. I told you this would happen. That's what we do all the time. You know, our thoughts, what we think about, become our words. And what we talk about become our actions. And what we do become our habits or our character. You know, my parents were drinkers. You know, it was they had a bar in the house, and they were, you know, always up for good times. I still remember my mom's 40th. Oh my word, tequila party. Okay, my dad's dad died of alcoholism when he was 8. He would actually get so drunk he would go stand naked in the middle of the town preaching. Funny enough, right? Give us a bad name, why don't you? But anyway, he died of liver damage. My dad would drink quite a bit. I still remember them fighting quite a bit about the drinking, but my mom would probably drink more, actually, if I had to think about it. You know, and my mom always warned me. She says, there's alcoholism in this family. You're going to become an alcoholic if you don't watch out. And then I started getting fearful about that. And I'm like, oh, this is not going to happen to me, but it kept in the back of my mind. And what happened? I became an alcoholic. I was like, at 18, I was a full-blown alcoholic, amongst other things. And this is the problem with fear. The spirit of fear can only be fixed when you give your life over to Jesus. Because if you're sitting there and you're worrying about things and you're fearing things, that means you haven't handed it over to God. You just haven't. Let's just be real about that. If you're worried about anything, And this is particularly true for us parents, and people that we care about. If you're worried about those things and you communicate those things to those people, it's going to become something in their life. And it's going to land up hurting them as well. Your spirit of fear doesn't just affect you. You will notice in this story, Balak's spirit of fear affected everybody. And it even affected the Israelites. And they had nothing to do with this. They didn't even know Balak was there, looking at them from the mountain. It's almost like Smeagol looking down on the mountain. It's almost like that picture in my mind where he's looking down and there's just people everywhere. It's a problem because anything that's not of God can permeate and fester, not only in your life, but in the people around you and in the people around them. And you're going to see what a massive effect this had, actually, not only on Balak, on Balaam, not so much on the donkey, but on the Israelites. We'll get to the donkey, don't worry. All right, so let's continue with the story. So Balak's freaking out. He's checking his Israelites, 2.4 million of them, something like 640,000 men, women, and children as well included. And he goes and he brings Bilam. And Bilam is this prophet for hire. Keep in mind, Bilam is now 640 kilometers away. That's a long distance to go fetch somebody. How well known was Bilam at the time? Must have been like a celebrity in the dark arts. So let's read here, Numbers 22:5, verse 8, 2:8. So Balak, son of Zippor, I'm going to read my version here. So Balak, son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at the time, sent messengers to summon Balaam, son of Beor, who was at Pethor, near the Euphrates River, in his native land. Balak said, I'm at verse 5.5. Where are we here? Look, a people has come from Egypt. See, they cover the face of the earth and are setting next to me. That's his fear. Therefore, please come at once, curse this people for me, that they are too mighty. For they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them out the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. That was his magic tricks. Okay? So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the diviner's fee in their hand, and they came to Balaam, 640 kilometers away, and spoke to him the words of Balak the king. And he said to them, lodge here tonight, and I will bring back word to you as the Lord speaks to me. So the princes of Moab stayed with Balaam. Quite some concerning text going on there. First of all, apparently Balaam can speak to God and God speaks to him. This is proof that God will even reach those kinds of people to give a message to them and use him for his own good. So, he was a very important person in the Bible, this Balaam. There's so much commentary on this character. And there's actually quite a few other verses about Balaam in the Bible. I'm going to read a few for you. So if we go to 2 Peter 2, verse 14 to 16, it says, you're having eyes full of adultery and that cannot cease from sin, enticing unstable souls. They have a heart trained in covetous practices and are accursed children. They have forsaken the right way and gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness, but he was rebuked for his mighty iniquity. A dumb donkey speaking with a man's voice restrained the madness of the prophet. And then Jude 1 verse 11. Woe to them, for they have gone in the way of Cain. They have run greedily in the error of Balaam for profit and perished in the rebellion of Korah. God is actually grouping those three people together. If you didn't know who Balaam was now you're going to know what a serious person this was. Cain killed Abel. Balaam we're learning about today. Korah was the one that stood up against Moses and says, I want to be leader. Why should you be leader? I want to be leader. What happened to Korah? He disappeared into the earth. Next, Joshua 13:22. The children of Israel also killed with the sword Balaam, the son of Beor, the soothsayer, among those who were killed by them. And this is when the Israelites have gone into the promised land. They found Balaam and they killed him. He ended up dead. He obviously never learned his lesson in this. Okay? So quite an important figure. There's another verse which we'll get to later. But what happens next? Balaam speaks with God. God actually spoke to Balaam and said, do not go with these men. So Balaam goes back to the princes of Balak and says, no, I can't go. Sorry. God says I can't go. So they leave, 640 k's back. They go speak to Balak. Balak is like, listen guys, just take more money, take people of higher status, go back to this guy and tell him he needs to come down now. So off they go back. They go back to Balaam and they say to Balaam, look, you really need to come, okay? And Balaam's like, I couldn't come even if Balak gave me a palace of silver and gold. That was his hint of his fee. Anyway, so God speaks to Balaam that night and says, okay, go with them. But you only say the words that I tell you. So Balaam's like, cool, let's do this thing. He wakes up in the morning, he saddles his donkey, and the Bible actually says, and God's anger flared up against Balaam. Why? He just told him he can go. Why is God upset with Balaam at this point? Balaam's intentions weren't right. You know, God can seek the thoughts of your heart. He knows what you're thinking. So clearly, Balaam's thoughts and intentions were not in line with what God had said. It's kind of similar to how a dad will tell his child, why don't you go to the park and take the dogs for a walk? And then the kid runs out the house with a soccer ball. And the dad's like, whoa, 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 what are you doing? You're not listening to me. And the kid's like, but you told me I can go to the park. If we don't follow the instructions of God clearly, and we do things in our own way, we're going to land up in error. It's the same thing, yeah, although this is at a bigger level, right? God said go with the intention to bless. Balaam wants to go with the intention to curse. Okay? And this is where the weird part of the story comes in. And I'm going to condense it for you, because if you had to read it, it'll take quite a while. But he gets on his donkey, and off he goes. Okay? And an angel of God stands in front of the donkey. Balaam can't see the angel of God. The donkey can. The donkey veers off the path. Balaam beats the donkey. Get back on the path. Donkey gets back on the path. They're then obviously going through a little town, and there's like a wall on the sides. And the angel stands in front of the donkey and Balaam again. And the donkey pushes and crushes Balaam's foot against the wall, and just to get past this angel. Okay? And Balaam's beating the donkey. And that should have really been a warning for him. If at that time the foot was a symbolic understanding of your walk with God. Now his foot is crushed. God's already telling him, listen, your walk's not that great. You're going to be walking around in circles now. So anyway, they get to an even tighter position in this town, where there's nowhere to turn. Okay? And God stands in front of that, the angel stands in front of that donkey again. And the donkey just lies down. And Balaam beats the donkey. Stupid donkey, what are you doing? And the donkey speaks to Balaam. And the donkey's like, I'm your donkey, right? And Balaam's like, yes. And the donkey's like, you've ridden me all your life, right? And the donkey says that, and Balaam's like, yes. And he's like, so, what have I done? Clearly something's happening here. And that's when Balaam's eyes were opened. And he could see the angel. And that's when he fell on his face and he realized what was going on. His eyes were closed, his spiritual eyes were closed, because his intentions were wrong. He was off to go do something he shouldn't have done. And he got blocked. And I want to ask you today, if you feel like you're getting blocked in your life with certain things, maybe you should check your heart. And I've had conversations with many people where they say, just nothing's going right. I can't get a job. I can't get this thing that I want. God's not giving me what I want. What Balaam wanted was a palace of silver and gold. Did he get that? No. He wanted to go curse the people. Did he get that? No. Those were important things for him. What's important for you might not be what you need. What you want is not what you need. What God wants to give you is what God wants to give you. And sometimes there's an angel blocking us. We can't see the angel because we're so worried about ourselves and what we want to accomplish. I can just imagine how many angels have blocked me in my life as well, and how many have protected me at the same time. And there's been many places in business where things have just been blocked, and I've been like, Abba, why? I spent a year on this product. I don't understand. It's the best product in the world. It should explode. And it made like 200 rand. And the competition was making like 2 million rand. And he just shuts things down. But then I realized after that, I never consulted him about that. That was not his plan. That was my plan. And there were other times where I should have got into cars when I was not in sober mind. And that car where I was going to sit was crashed. I should have been dead. God will protect you, but God will also block you if you're doing things out of line. So if you are getting blocked, you should just try and think a little bit. But let's talk a little bit about this talking donkey, right? It's one of the weirdest things in the Bible. The first time you read this, you're like, nah, this can't be right. You read it again. But it's not the first time an animal spoke in the Bible. When's the other time? Garden of Eden, the snake. We don't question, hey, why is the snake speaking? But if a donkey speaks, we're all like, wow, that's not right. It's a bit like Shrek. Eh? But what God's actually trying to tell you is that if he can make a donkey speak, how much more so can he make a man speak? And this is what he's basically showing Balaam here. If I can make this donkey speak to you, I'm going to make you speak my words when you go there. So moving on, Numbers 22, 31 to 35. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand. I would have freaked out at that point. And he bowed his head and fell flat on his face. And the angel of the Lord said to him, why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? I love how the angel's so concerned about the donkey. Behold, I've come out to stand against you because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, surely I would also have killed you by now and let her live. And Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned, for I did not know you stood in the way against me. Now therefore, if it displeases you, I will turn back. Then the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, go with the men, but only the word that I speak to you, that you shall speak. So Balaam went with the princes of Balak. Interesting times, but there's 3 warnings here. And this is where you guys can start picturing in your life what's happening. Okay? If you are going in the wrong direction, here's three situations that might be happening to you. The first one with the donkey and Balaam is it was an open road, and the donkey veered off. I want you to understand, when that donkey veered off, there were still multiple directions that you could go. Okay? Obviously, a lot of them are your own directions, but there's really only one direction from God. So you should seek at that point, if things have just veered off, maybe you should seek counsel from God and ask where you should be going. Because when you get to the next part and you don't listen and you continue going, something's going to get crashed. Okay? The only direction in the second point where the angel stood there was Balaam could either go forwards or backwards. If he went forwards, he would have been in more trouble, which we find out later on. But then you need to ask yourself, I've run out of options. It seems like the only way I can, at this point, is move forward and not know what's going to happen, or move backward. That's God giving you a clear indication of where you should go. If you are moving and things are hurting, maybe you should stop and turn the other direction. The last one is even more serious, and that's when you haven't listened at all, and you land up with the animal lying down, and you have nowhere to go, because the angel of the Lord is right there by you. And Tam actually said something so profound to me last night. She said, that's as if the beast is in control of the man. Because he couldn't go anywhere. He couldn't get the donkey to move. The donkey just lay down. He beat the donkey. That's when your beast, your flesh, is in control of you so much that all you can do is just lie flat down on the floor and look up at God. And God will have to speak to you from that point. And that's happened to many people many times. It happened to me in my life. There was nowhere else for me to go except lie on the floor crying, looking up at God. Don't get to that point, because it's a very difficult point to get to. But if you do, the only way from there is up. And that's if you give your life over to Jesus at that point and you move forward in his walk. Right. So, long story short, Balaam lands up with Balak. and he gets prepared to curse the people. So what he does is he rocks up there and he says, okay, Balak, I need you to build me an altar on this mountain so I can see the people, and I want you to get me some animals, and we're going to make a sacrifice, and we're going to try persuade this God to curse these people. Okay? So Balak is finally happy with this guy's here. It must have taken absolute weeks to get there. Okay? Balak's been patient. He's like, these people they're going to destroy my land. I can't wait for Balaam to come. And Balaam gets there, and he speaks this message on Numbers 23, verse 7 to 10. He says, and he took up his oracle and said, this is Balaam speaking now, Balak, the king of Moab, has brought me from Aram, from the mountains of the east. Come, curse Jacob for me, and come denounce Israel. How shall I curse whom God has not cursed? How shall I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced? For from the top of the rocks I see him, and from the hills I behold him. There are people dwelling alone, not reckoning itself among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob, or number 1/4 of Israel? Let me die the death of the righteous, and let my end be like his. Balak's now upset. He's like, hang on a second, bro. I brought you all this way to curse these people. What are you doing? Balaam's like, listen, but I'm just doing what God tells me to do. And Balaam says, okay, let's try again. Let's try this again, right? And then they go off on another mountain, and they make another altar. More animals get sacrificed, poor animals. And then we get to Numbers 23, 18 to 23. And as he speaks, he now wants to curse the people. And Balak's like rubbing his hands together, and he's like, here we go. And Balaam says, where are we? 23, 18. Yeah. Then he took up his oracle again and said, rise up, Balak, and hear. Listen to me, son of Zippor. So instead of cursing the people now, he's actually now God speaking to Balak. God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should repent. Has he said, and will he not do? Or has he spoken, and will he not make it good? Behold, I have received the command to bless. He has blessed, and I cannot reverse it. He has not observed iniquity in Jacob, nor has he seen wickedness in Israel. The Lord his God is with him, and the shout of a king is among them. God brings them out of Egypt. He has strength like a wild ox, for there is no sorcery against Jacob, nor any divination against Israel. It now must be said of Jacob and of Israel, oh, what God has done. I love it when God does this. He's talking about the children of Israel in two different terms. Okay? When he says Jacob, there's no sorcery against Jacob and no divination against Israel. Do you know that Jacob and Israel are the same man? Jacob's name changed to Israel. Israel means a man that wrestles with God. Okay? And Jacob is laughter. No? Yaakov. Yitzhak is laughter. I can't remember what Jacob is, but it doesn't matter. His name was changed. But what I want you to point out is when he references the name Jacob, he's talking about Jacob in the physical sense. When he references his name as Israel, he's talking about Jacob in the spiritual sense. So he's saying it's not going to happen. You're not going to curse these people physically or spiritually. It's not happening. Okay? And now Balak is frothing at the mouth because he's thinking, what the heck is going on? And then we get to the third time. And Balaam says, let's try again. And they go up to another mountain. And then Numbers 24, 15 to 19 says, so he took up his oracle and said, the utterance of Balaam the son of Beor, and the utterance of the man whose eyes are opened, the utterance of him who hears the words of God and has the knowledge of the Most High, who sees the vision of the Almighty, who falls down with eyes wide open. Now listen to this and tell me who you think he's talking about here. I see him, but not now. I behold him. Notice the capitals. But not near. A star shall come out of Jacob. A scepter shall rise out of Israel and batter the brow of Moab and destroy all the sons of tumult. We'll just stop there. It's talking about Jesus. The very prophet, I get you now, the very prophet that was supposed to curse is now prophesying about the coming Jesus. It blows my mind. Yes?
Sorry, just to explain what Jacob's name means.
Yes.
It comes from the word hill. Because remember,
Oh, yes, strike the hill, yeah.
Esau, he grabbed
He grabbed his heel. Right.
Yeah, so it also means to follow, to demand, to supplant, circumvent, assail, overreach.
Okay, thank you. So, Balaam's now prophesying about David and Jesus coming. And Balak is now really upset. And he sends him away. But there's an important lesson here. The Israelites had no idea of what was happening behind the scenes. Remember, I started off by saying God works behind the scenes in your life. They had no idea. They were going around their daily business, not knowing what was going on. There's people trying to curse them on a mountaintop behind them. You see, God protects the people that are close to Him from spiritual attack. If you are a child of God, you will be protected. And the exact opposite is true. If you are not a child of God, it goes to show you what was Balaam famous for? Cursing people or blessing people, depending on how much you pay him. He would use the other forces, right, that are against God to change your life for bad or good. Because we know that the enemy can actually make people rich. We've seen this. So if you are a child of God, you're protected by things like this. But you need to be close with Jesus. It's the only way. You need to be in that camp. And I'm not saying that everything's sort of peaches and roses, right? I mean, a lot of us go through some hard times. But what I am saying is you will be spiritually protected. Your spirit will be protected from those curses. One of the other scary things in this is that the only thing that can stand in your way, it's not Balaam, it's not Balak, it's not a donkey, it's you. It's you. You are the only thing that can mess up your life, let me tell you that. Because listen to what happens next. Numbers 25, 1-3. Pay very careful attention here. Now Israel remained in Acacia Grove, and the people began to commit harlotry with the women of Moab. What the heck is going on here now? The Moabites are now in the camp. The women of Moab. They invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel was joined to Baal of Peor. That's the deity of the Canaanites. And the anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel. So Balaam knew he couldn't get God to curse the people. But he knew if he got the dark forces to go tempt the people can turn against God. He gave Balak one piece of advice before he left. And listen to that advice that he gave in Revelation 2:14. But I have few things against you, because you have there those who hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols and to commit sexual immorality. So before Balaam left, he was like, there's no ways I'm going to get this God to curse these people, but I've got something else up my sleeve. Listen, you send your woman into the camp, and you entice those men, because if you can change the men's hearts, you change the entire family's hearts. And he sent the woman in, and the men committed idolatry and adultery. So they successfully drew them away from God. People died that day. Lots of people died that day. You know, as much as God is protecting us from external forces, what is protecting us from internal forces? A lot of that stuff comes from within. Remember what I said? What you think about becomes what you talk about, becomes what you do. Okay? Even Peter warns us in 1 Peter 5 verse 8. He says, be of sober spirit, be on the alert. The adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. If that doesn't scare you, it should, because that sounds a lot like what Balaam and Balak were doing on those mountaintops. Okay, they were waiting for someone to go outside the camp. And even John warns us against the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the boastful pride of life. So this is my heavy part of the message. I want to warn whoever needs this, okay? Because I've had this in my life. The adversary can tempt us in 3 ways: sexual lust, greed of money, and power. Now, if you are battling with any of these things, I'm here to tell you now that you are not in the camp of God. You are not near God. You have walked away. Sexual lust is a big, big problem. It's huge. You know, in biblical times, the root cause of all of that was Baal worship, pagan worship. And I'll keep it family friendly. But what they would do is they would go to altars and high mountains, and they would all go do some things on those mountains in full view of everyone. And then people watching would be enticed and want to go join, especially the Israelites. And that's why I warned them, do not go do what they do. Don't even go there. What do we have in place of that today? It's on a computer. It's on your phones. It's readily accessible unless you're in mainland China. And even then, the people try their best to get it. That is what Balaam did to the Israelites. If you get lost and you get drawn away, and the only thing that's on your mind is that lust or that greed or that power all the time, you need to understand this here today, is that you are so far from God at that point that you need to stop. Because you've gone past the path where you have multiple options. You've gone past the road where you've crushed your foot and you are lying flat down on your back. And you are out of options now. You need to come back to the camp of God. And the only way is through that door, that life, Jesus. That's the only way. So how do you do it? Well, you should probably speak to Craig or myself. Afterwards, phone us if you're battling with any of this. Got to tell you, most of us have been there. Most of us have been there. This is something that plagued me for many years. As a kid, let me tell you, going up into my adult years. And the only way I broke this was by giving my life over to Jesus. So, those 3, the lust, the greed for money, and the love of power, God gives us examples of this in the Bible. Obviously, the lust are these Moabite women coming into the Israelite camp and the men making mistakes there. Okay? The greed for money, we can think of a nice example where someone in the Bible, very close to Jesus, had a lot of greed for money. His name starts with a J and ends with a Judas. Judas, correct. And the love of power, I spoke about him earlier, where Korach actually comes up against Moses and says, I want to be leader, you don't have to be. And Korach disappears. The Israelite men that got involved there disappeared. Judas, dead. It's a very serious warning. So just check yourself there, okay? Sorry it's a bit heavy, but I feel it is necessary. So a couple of lessons for today, and this is where I'm going to end off, all right? There's a couple of lessons that we learned today. The people who are afraid of you and your walk with God, some of them will try to curse you, but you don't have to worry. Because if you're close to God, those curses are just going to bounce right off. Remember what God said to Abraham, I will bless those who bless you, I'll curse those who curse you. Okay? We are also children of Abraham. Being envious of someone else's things becomes a curse for you. Balak was kind of freaked out. They were way bigger in size than what he was. He was envious to a degree. It became a curse on him to want to get rid of them because he was envious of them and their numbers. If you are coveting something of someone, then that's going to become a curse for you. So check that. And if you're close to God, and you're sons and daughters of the Most High, you are part of that spiritual protection. As long as there's less of you, more of God in your life. Okay? And one of the most important lessons here, it's a nice little short lesson. Okay? The Moabites, right? As I mentioned, were a nation that was spawned from a person called Moab, who was the son of Lot and his daughter. Not a nice thing to think about. Okay? They reckon they had valid reasons for doing it because they thought the world was going to end, but still doesn't ring nicely in my ears. You would think that their destiny was doomed, right? Well, in a way, yes and no. They weren't the nicest of people. They were always kind of at war. David went to war with them. I know Saul went to war with them. There's quite bad prophecies against them that they're going to all disappear and not make it. But let me tell you something, okay? If you were born as a Moabite, how do you think you would have felt? You would have had all that history behind you. Let's put it in another term. Imagine being born as a German after the Holocaust, just after the Holocaust, where the whole world is like against you. Okay? And you feel so ashamed of your history. But you know it's who you are, it's what you came from. Or if your parents would drink, you feel like that's what I am. Or if your parents would do other stuff, you feel like that's part of me. After all, the Bible says the sins of the father is carried down to the sins of the children. Right? Do you know if you go to Matthew 1, Jesus, in his lineage, was a Moabite woman. That should freak you out. How many of you knew that? Not many people know that. Ruth was a Moabite woman, but there's a key lesson out of this. Ruth denounced her history, denounced her family lineage, and grouped herself with Israel. She chose Jesus, in other words. She said, all of this that is me is no longer. And I'm going to come into a new body, a new mind, and I'm going to be one with God through Jesus. It doesn't matter what your family lineage is. Mine told me I was going to be an alcoholic, and I have a very addictive personality, and that turned out to be true in my life until I gave my life over to Jesus. And Jesus gives us that blueprint. He says, one of my ancestors was one of these women. You know, it comes from a history of women that did that. But it doesn't matter, because when you get baptized, you are a new creation. And that should give you hope. So whatever your father or mother did, whatever their parents did, all the issues that were with them is not with you when you choose God. Okay? And the last thing, obviously, we have a knack of bringing about the things that we fear about ourselves. So we need to speak life into our lives and life into those around us, specifically and more importantly, the people in our lives, the family members. We need to speak life into them and hold off on those fears. Okay?